I've heard her say Chi-Chi.
Chi-Chi. When I lived in North Carolina, people called it cooter cat, which I loved.
Whoa. Okay. It made me die laughing.
The coochie snatcher. Yeah.
Exactly.
The punani, all of them. We actually invite students to name all of the names that they have associated with these body parts out loud. It's important to understand that culturally you may have named it something else, but it's also important to know the medical terminology. And in the same way, when we're using this gendered language and thinking within these binaries of woman, man, this is the test and the vaccine that you need, this is not what you need, we are leaving trans people out of the conversation. We're leaving intersex people out of the conversation.
Welcome to Birds.Bees.Bodies, a Planned Parenthood of Southeast and North Florida podcast where we break barriers, tear down stigmas, and promote open discussions on sexual and reproductive health. Get the buzz on topics from puberty to menopause, contraception to conception. No topic is off limits. So sit back, relax, and let's dive into a judgment-free zone to promote sexual wellness.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another podcast of Birds.Bees.Bodies. Happy Pride Month. We're so excited to be able to do this podcast today, talking about all things LGBTQ plus care and our involvement in the LGBTQ plus communities in Florida. I am Ashok Asada, VP of Communications for Planned Parenthood of Southeast and North Florida, along with my co-host, Clara T., who is our comms manager. And today we have two exciting guests with us. We have Dr. Chelsea Daniels, who is a staff physician for Planned Parenthood of Southeast and North Florida. And we have V. Villaverde, who is a community health educator for the organization as well. Welcome to you both. We're so excited to have you. Do you want to just jump in and share a little bit of background and how you work with our LGBTQ plus communities, kind of your experience and just share a little bit about yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is V. Villaverde. I use she, they pronouns. So like I mentioned, I'm a community health educator. So what that means is I go out into the community and I provide information, workshops, I do tablings, I go out into nonprofits, into schools, and I provide sexual health education as comprehensive as we can get in this day and age with all of the restrictions that are coming down. And my bread and butter is really to provide queer LGBTQI sexual health education. And so I'm looking for my queer students when I go out into the community, specifically trying to include them in my education, make sure that they feel seen, and that they feel like they're included in the education that they're receiving.
Thanks so much, V. It's so important to be able to, bring that space of belonging to all of the groups that we work with. Dr. Daniels, if you want to share a little bit about your background.
So my name is Chelsea Daniels. I'm a staff physician here at Planned Parenthood, and I provide a full range of reproductive health services, including abortion care and birth control, and also gender-affirming hormonal therapy. So what that looks like is we both establish and continue folks who are looking to start their gender transition in whatever form that takes. It often involves hormones. And so I have those conversations with people and make sure that we're helping them meet their goals for their identity.
I wanted to touch on, the services that we offer, because a lot of people know that Planned Parenthood offers gender affirming care in Florida. I know we're restricted in how we offer that care. But we also, like, our range of services are really, very LGBTQ plus welcoming in the community. We offer care that's non-judgmental. It's compassionate care. We respect people's identities. We're probably one of the very few, if not the only, healthcare providers in the state that will, honor your pronouns, your preferred name. Like, we try to make everybody in our communities feel welcome. And there's a certain knowledge that goes with that. And V, you've done a lot of work with training our staff through the Include training workshops that you've done. Talk a little bit about that, what it takes to be, LGBTQ plus welcoming in the healthcare setting, because it's not something that, unfortunately, in Florida is universal.
Yeah, so not only is it not universal, it's something that, the state in many ways is actively working against. right? So I was supposed to provide the Include training, for instance, at our Golden Glades Health Center down here in Miami. We did it last year. We've done it across the state this year. And it was scheduled, and then we had to not do the training because of some of the laws and the legislation that have come down. As you know, we have like Don't Say Gay. We had the extension of that go into the workplace. That was something that we were lobbying against. So, for instance, we have a program called Light. And so that's Leaders Igniting a Generation of Healthy Teens. And that is a cohort of teens that we recruit across the state of Florida in our high schools. And with those teens, we go up to Tallahassee at every legislative session, and we lobby against those bad bills that make it harder to do our jobs. And so, one of those bad bills was extending Don't Say Gay into the workplace. And unfortunately, that has trickled down, right? We have experienced a lot of censorship in what we can say. And currently in my work, I can't even say gender anymore. Right. And so that creates so many barriers for us to even have these conversations. So what the Include training really does is invite healthcare professionals to talk about it, right? So what are some of your assumptions around what it means to be a boy, what it means to be a girl, what it means to be trans? Have you ever heard about these identities? Do you know what it means to live with these identities and to go into a healthcare professional, into a healthcare setting and to receive this care, right? And we do role play scenarios where we, engage with what are some of the beliefs that you had growing up around this messaging, right? And then how do we engage with these biases where you can recognize maybe this is something that I take into the workplace without realizing it. And how can I leave that at the door and be more inclusive in the way that I approach every client, and so instead of using gendered language, how can I say things like, and adjust to things like folks, right? When we're thinking about the design of the health center, how do we make sure that the pictures that are around us are inclusive of the people that are coming and walking in through the door, right? How do we make sure that we honor all pronouns? And so things like that is what we just create the space for people to engage, to talk about, and to make mistakes, right? To name that, to get it wrong, and to recognize how to apologize and get it right.
Chelsea, linked to all this that Vanessa V is telling us, we see that the political climate in Florida has gotten increasingly hostile toward this community, LGBTQ+. How can you explain how are we helping?
I mean, from my perspective, the biggest kind of legal hurdle that my patients are facing is this 12-page Board of Medicine consent that must be signed in person with a doctor. And it is lengthy and it is riddled with inaccuracies because it wasn't written by, doctors actually providing this care. It was written by lawmakers and legislators with a really obvious bias and with an agenda. But that we have it printed out and ready to go at every visit so that folks who are coming in either looking to initiate hormones or make changes to their hormones, which is kind of the bulk of the reason that I'm seeing folks here in the health center, we're just kind of ready to go. The other kind of hurdle with it is that it has to be re-signed anytime we make a change to an existing medicine. So if someone has been on hormone for years and years and years and stable and wants to switch from an oral to an injectable form or something, has to re-sign the same inaccurate consent. And we also have to have a witness present in the room. So we always have a dedicated staff member with us who is our witness for this consent to sign and basically attest that this patient.
It has to be in person. This used to be we could do this work via telehealth before with this care, which obviously created more access for folks, but now.
This is all in person. Yeah. So it's, it's the kind of thing we know that not only is prescribing hormones and life-saving, it's also pretty simple. Like it's from a medical clinical perspective, it's one of the easiest things that I do. And so the fact that we have to jump through all of these hoops for to appease legislators for safety concerns. I memean, it's laughable because we're prescribing much more meds with more side effects and risks on a daily basis that where you don't need to sign a 12-page consent in front of a witness. So
yeah, and just to clarify for our listeners and the audience, like we're talking about gender affirming care through hormone therapy, and we at Planned Parenthood we only provide that care to adults at this time. We've been providing it to adults. I know the state passed restrictions, and other providers may have provided it to minors in the past, but we've always only provided it to adults at our organization.
Yeah.
One of the things that V mentioned that I really wanted to touch on was, she talked about the language and just in general how we approach care from an inclusive lens. These are things, Dr. Daniels, and I'd love for you to touch on this, that to my knowledge, I've never heard of physicians when they go through residency and go through all this. It's not part of your training. Like, I don't know if you go through some type of bedside manner training, for patients, but I'm pretty positive I've heard that, not all this stuff is very foreign to them once they start practicing. It's up to you to adopt these inclusive practices in your daily work.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's becoming more commonplace, but it all depends on where you do your training, not just the hospital system, but also the state. So if you're in a hostile state, like the training that you're going to get on gender inclusivity in San Francisco is going to be different than it is in Miami, just by virtue of the fact that there are state laws hampering what you can and can't say to patients. And that's a shame. I mean, we see that across so many sectors of healthcare, right? We've talked so much about abortion care and how where you do your residency training affects what you can learn about abortion. It's the same for this kind of thing. I luckily trained in places where I was able to learn this and was able to learn how to provide this care and be inclusive. But I think that, to Michelle's point, is a rarity, and we're doing our patients a disservice. I mean, it's just, at the end of the day, it's just bigotry to not know how to provide this kind of care and meet patients where they are.
And, in addition to gender affirming hormone therapy, there is also a wide range of services that we offer. And we offer it in a way that is welcoming and inclusive to the LGBTQ plus community. I think people, when they think of, what does LGBTQ plus care look like? It looks like care for any other person, except you respect people for who they show up as. You tailor their care to what their needs are. So I wanted to chat a little bit about that, when it comes to pelvic exams, when it comes to breast exams, when it comes to HPV shots, birth control. All of those things are things that the LGBTQ plus care community still comes to us for, aside from those who are seeking gender affirming hormone therapy. So I wanted to chat about that because there's an education component too. There are, folks who might want to explore, different forms of counseling. There are folks that might want to explore, other ways of transitioning besides using hormone therapy. So can we talk a little bit about that? Like, what are the needs, and how do we help this community get that care when we know there's such a scarcity of providers that can really understand and work with the LGBTQ plus community?
I think from my perspective, oftentimes when I do kind of initial consultations for folks who are considering hormones, I think that most people, by the time they've come to see me, they are interested in starting hormones, but that's not 100% of people, because, to Michelle's point, being part of the LGBTQ community and thinking about what a transition looks like, it's not cookie cutter. Everyone's transition looks different. And you might want to start hormones, you might not. And so I think that a lot of times the visits that I have with people are less about hormones and more about other ways that we can aid in someone's transition. So resources and connecting them with community organizations, to folks like V, so that they feel like they're in a more inclusive community. And I think a lot of that, going also back to something that V said, is about our language. So with the HPV vaccine, for example, the HPV vaccine is something that we all need because it causes cervical and penile cancer. I'm frequently seeing cis women and encouraging them to get the vaccine. And I'm saying because it can cause cervical cancer. But I always say, but this affects people with penises too, because I think that there is this idea that this is like a girl's cancer. And I think that making sure that we're using inclusive language is important for gender affirming care, but it's also important just for good health care.
Absolutely. And we offer the HPV vaccine for everyone. I know there isn't a test out yet that's, I think, FDA approved for people with penises to screen for HPV, but we do offer the vaccine to everyone. I wanted to talk about other things too that are part of it, of care, and not everybody who comes to us is looking to start hormone therapy or looking to start on some sort of type of treatment to transition. Sometimes it's as simple as education about their bodies, or different types of routes that they want to pursue, like breast binding, I've heard, is something that they want to get education on. So can we talk about like how that education varies, either V or Dr. Daniels, like depending on what the person is looking for, what kind of care they need?
Yeah, so I think, to the point of what does LGBTQI sexual health education look like, or care look like? It looks like care that's inclusive of everybody in the community, right? And so to Dr. Daniel's point of using inclusive language, when I go out into the community and I talk about HPV vaccines, or I talk about any treatment or any care that's offered to our community, I'm trying not to use gendered language. I'm moving away from some of the assumptions that we have. For instance, a really big assumption is that lesbian sex is somehow less high risk, or that you can't transmit STIs, or you shouldn't use protection. A lot of people don't know about things like dental dams, right? And there's also a dental dam shortage across the state. And so you see it translate into the amount of resources that are put into certain protections, right? And so I say things like, well, if you want to enjoy oral sex and with a vulva, you can put plastic wrap, kitchen plastic wrap. It's something that most people have in their kitchen. And you can use that as a barrier method, right? And I'm using alternative language. So instead of, men or boys to say somebody with a penis, I say the penile reproductive system or the vulvar reproductive system. I just tend towards focusing on the reproductive system and the body part and using medical terminology, so that we could get adjusted to that kind of language, because a lot of people are under a lot of medical misinformation that gets taught over a lifetime that never gets untaught, right? And so most people think, for instance, when we do our anatomy lesson, most people think of their vulva as actually their vagina. That's how they name it, right? And so it's just combating some of that basic medical misinformation so that we can continue to have these conversations on another level.
Do you think that, and I think about this all the time as we talk more about body parts and what exams are needed for everyone, and I think Planned Parenthood does a really good job at being inclusive and talking about things for the way they are, right? If you have a vulva, vagina, you should be getting a pap exam depending on your age every certain amount of years, right? If you have a penis, you should be doing this. Do you think that as a society, we steer away from using those terms because we're scared to say vulva, we're scared to say penis, we're scared to say vagina, like, because you hear it all the time with medical societies, women should get this exam, all these, every so often or whatever, breast exams, like, people with penises have breasts too. So like, getting more used to using the body parts and teaching our youth to not be afraid to understand what a body part is and what it does. Because I think it will provide more clarity, right, on who needs this exam. And just saying women, well, that can be very different for someone nowadays, who's considered a woman, who's not considered a woman.
Yeah, I think that this is a hill I'll die on too. I'm totally with V. Like the number of times I even have patients refer to their penis or vagina as down there. And I'm like, if we can't name our own body parts, then what are we doing? Like, this is, I think it's so important. Like, it's not a bad word to say vulva or vagina or penis, but I think just societally, it's become so taboo.
Yeah, for Clara, it's chichi. I've heard her say chichi.
Chichi.
Yeah, that's the way we say it, like kind of cute.
When I lived in North Carolina, people called it cooter cat, which I loved.
Whoa, okay. It made me die laughing.
the
Yeah,
coochie snorcher. Yeah.
exactly.
Punani, all of them. We actually invite students to name all of the names that they have associated with these body parts out loud as part of our Anatomy of the Reproductive System presentation, because I think it's important to understand that culturally you may have named it something else, but it's also important to know the medical terminology so that you're in the know, so that, for instance, if somebody, a young child is being abused and the only name they have for their body part is their cookie, and they're saying somebody's touching my cookie, they might not get, flagged as this child is being abused because they don't have the right language for it. And in the same way, when we're using this gendered language and thinking within these binaries of woman, man, this is the test and the vaccine that you need, this is not what you need, we are leaving trans people out of the conversation. We're leaving intersex people out of the conversation. Biology, nature has so much variety and diversity in terms of how our anatomy looks like, and we exist on a spectrum that is so fluid that it is really important to be specific about what anatomy you have, because some folks, for instance, might have an external vulva and internal testes, right? And so how do we provide accurate sexual health care to them if we are only speaking within woman and man? That might not be accurate for their reproductive system.
How can we help all the LGBTQ plus community in the mental health field? How can we help them mentally and to deal with all the what you guys were saying, hostile environment and hate and stigma?
Take away the legal barriers for them to be able to access care. I think a really big part of I saw a video about how in Thailand, it's as easy as being able to go into a pharmacy and getting testosterone and estrogen and progesterone over the counter, right? And so it's when you get rid of some of the barriers to just being able to get your health care, that leaps and bounds improves the quality of life you're going to have, right? And so housing, not being discriminated against by your government and by people around you, right? Having more positive connections in your community. So funding mutual aid networks that can provide and create those networks and those safety nets that sometimes are left behind by these policies that are intentionally meant to kill us, if we're being honest about it, right? And to erase us, right? So I think, just combating the misinformation, letting people know, like, we love you, you belong in this world, and we're going to make sure that we keep us safe, right? Outside of that, I think creating more funds where I know like the Mackenzie Project down here in Miami has a fund for any trans folks or any gender diverse folks that need mental health therapy or resources, to connect them with an organization, for instance, like the Alliance for LGBTQI Youth, and to provide a voucher to be able to pay for that session. Because oftentimes a huge barrier is the $75 copay or the $100 a session. When I'm worried about food on the table or therapy, people are going to choose food. And so just trying to, provide those additional resources outside of just government assistance.
And we have, a mental health program as well. We have referrals that we can help community members that come to us. If we don't offer something that you need, we can always refer out. We also have partnerships with other organizations that will pay for your mental health care too. So I think it's just worth reaching out and seeing what your situation is, what kind of care you're looking for. We have an LGBTQ plus support group that I know our mental health program offers as well, that has been very popular and very, very useful to our communities. I don't want this to all sound like doom and gloom, because I know there's a lot of barriers. And I know when I ask you, what is the biggest barrier to expanding this type of care in the state, you're going to tell me, well, government interference. That's going to be, the biggest barrier, because, right, if you don't have these restrictions on care, then more providers are able to open the door to offering this care to the community. And in what ways we're able to offer the care. But I think also importantly, we have to talk about how people in the community can show up and be allies. And there's a ton of Pride celebrations happening this month. And not to just single out Pride Month, right? Because you should be showing this support year round. But it is a time for celebration. It is a time for camaraderie, unifying communities. And it's very uplifting to see folks out and being their authentic selves, enjoying each other and celebrating Pride. What ways can people show up and be allies for the LGBTQIA plus community?
I think that there are obviously, this is not a one size fits all approach. And there are a ton of different ways that I think folks do it. I think just because the kind of bulk of my work is obviously here in the health center in the clinic, the best thing that I can do is to foster an environment in the clinic where when patients come here, they feel inclusive and they feel like they're well taken care of. And I think that small things go a long way. So clarifying pronouns at every visit, which we routinely do, clarifying, we have built into our EMR what we call an organ inventory. V kind of mentioned this, like making sure you understand what organs you're dealing with. So is there an external vulva and an internal testes, for example? Is there, has a patient had a hysterectomy, but there's cervix left and cervix needs to be pap smeared? And I think that as a healthcare provider, those kinds of small things are actually quite large, both to someone's health and to someone's feeling of belonging in a healthcare setting where they oftentimes might not feel like they belong.
Our organizing team hosts a variety of events each month, and there's so many Pride events happening this month where I would say go ahead and look up the events on our Florida Alliance of Planned Parenthood Affiliates website. It's fappa.org. Check out the schedule of events of where they're going to be at. Get involved, come out and say hi. I think it's so exciting, to be able to connect with individuals that are, I guess, like-minded, right? Like we're all just celebrating our authentic selves out there, supporting one another. And I think from what I continue to learn and hear, really just creating a safe space for people to just connect and celebrate and engage. I think that's what Planned Parenthood does, what our mission is, our mottos and values of all are welcome here. I think that there's so much ugliness going on in the world right now, and in our country, in our state, that being able to take the time to just show up and just celebrate and have a few hours of a good time is a great way to show up and be an ally and be supportive. I do want to share that if you want to get some more information about trans, non-binary care, our LGBTQ plus services at our organization, please visit our website, ppsenfl.org. Or you can call us if you want to make an appointment, if you want to set up a consultation and just talk to someone, if you want to set up a mental health care appointment and just talk to a therapist about what is happening in your life and what programs might work for you, if it's talk therapy, if it's a support group. I think the first step is just trying to see if you can get support and if you can get care. Like we mentioned, finances are sometimes a barrier for people to get healthcare and to be able to get the mental health care they need. Please don't let that deter you from just reaching out and seeing what's available to you, whether you're insured or uninsured. Call us at 1-800-230-PLAN. Happy Pride Month. And please read a little bit about Pride, learn about all the different things that are celebrated this month, what the Stonewall Revolution is all about, the Stonewall riots, read about what the origin is. We're excited to be able to celebrate this month. And we'll see you next time on the next podcast. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.